Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Yes, this is another audio. This has been a very interesting past week or two for me in many ways. And so I like to use every opportunity to give God praise and glory whenever I can share things. So for those of you who are new to my channel or have never heard the story, I don't think I may have talked about it once or twice on this channel. It may be in a testimony video on in my testimonies playlist, because I've shared multiple testimonies. I don't just have one testimony, I have multiple testimonies. There's multiple things that God has done in my life and pulled me out of and delivered me from and rescued me from, and etc. So I think I may have talked about this once or twice, but it's been quite a while if I've talked about it at all. So I'll just give a recap for those of you who are new to the channel or don't know this part of my story. So for those of you who do not know, my mother was brutally murdered in 2018. She was not ill. She was 55 years old. She had her health. What she did not have was mental peace, emotional peace. What she did not have was a healthy marriage, a stable marriage. And effectively, my mother was married to a man she should have never married. I asked her not to marry this man. I knew that God showed me that this man was unsafe. But you can't tell your 55-year-old mother what to do, so she was convinced that she was in love with this man. My mother had a lot of her own unhealed childhood wounds. I believe she thinks she had healed these wounds, but she absolutely had not healed them. And I could see that just by the men that she chose. After my parents divorced when I was in college, my mom dated several men and was in multiple relationships. And I could just see a pattern in the men that she was choosing, that her psychology and her wounds had not healed, because this is typically what it looks like, especially in women, is that when you have been abused by your father, which my mother was in multiple ways, if you don't heal those wounds from that abuse, what you do then throughout your adult life is you select men subconsciously who match his abuse pattern, or who will give you love plus pain, right? When people are abused as children, it rewires the brain and it rewires the psychology to say, pain can't exist without love and love can't exist without pain. They must go together. And until you unlearn that and untie that and unpack that, you will always look for love and pain to go together. So this was my mom's story. So she married this man. I knew he was unsafe. His previous wife mysteriously died, and there was no autopsy done on her. And so they classified it as dying of natural causes. And I knew when I heard this story, I knew when I talked to her kids, who are my age, that he had killed their mother as well. And so my mother married this man after meeting him on the internet and only knowing him a few months. She married him. And it was absolute hell. There's no other way. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. There's no other way for me to say it. It was absolute hell, that entire marriage. And we had to go through that. We had to experience that. We had to hear that. It was late night phone calls, him standing over her waking up and he's standing over her while she's sleeping. There was physical abuse. There were lots and lots of guns in the home. Just not even red flags, like red flags on fire, okay? Like, we should have gotten out of this a long time ago. We should have never done this type of red flags on fire. Like, this is not healthy. But as her grown adult kids, we didn't really know what to do. What do you do when the person is going through that, but you can tell that they also don't want out of it? And I could just see that my mother was trapped in her own wounds, and she was trapped in this relationship. And I don't have enough time to talk about all the things that happened, but it was hell. It was unhealthy. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. And effectively, he also had his own wounds. And my mom tried to do therapy. She tried a lot of different things to cope with this narcissistic personality disorder man that she had married. In 2018, one evening, not evening, it was the middle of the night, 1 a.m., I got a phone call that would change my life forever. And my brother called me and said that our mother had been killed. And if you've seen my testimony, if you've watched any of my testimony videos, you know that one of the things that God delivered me from was New Age, tarot, astrology, coming out of that world. I wasn't in it for long. It was only a few years. And the Lord delivered me from that. But the night my mother was killed, I couldn't sleep that night, which is very interesting. And when I got the call, I was actually watching a tarot reading on YouTube. And the guilt that I carried from that for the next 5 years was very hard on me. I was just able to release that about 2 years ago. So it's been 7 years. My mother was shot in the head with a gun. I don't know what kind of gun it was. There were a lot of guns in the home. And the entire case from start to finish was never done correctly. There were mistakes. There were flub-ups. The Texas Rangers were called to the crime scene, and then they were called off of the crime scene, and then they were called back into the crime scene or into the case a couple of weeks later. I've spoken to Texas Rangers. I've spoken to deputies. I've spoken to investigators. And so suddenly I found myself in a Lifetime movie. And I couldn't believe this was my life. This is not something I ever thought I would have to go through. And I grew up, for the most part, in church. My family was all very talented. We were all musicians and sang, and we traveled even sometimes and sang. And my mom played the keys, and my dad was a bass player, not my biological father, my dad that I grew up with, my brother's father. And I sang. My brother could play drums. We were a very talented family. We were in the church for years. So this was not something that would be like kind of a given based on my childhood or how I grew up. This was completely outside of the scope of anything I had ever dealt with in my entire existence. And I felt like I was suddenly dropped down into a Lifetime movie. The next 4 years would be filled with contempt, me trying to work through forgiving this man for taking my mother's life, being upset with this police department who completely messed up this entire case, couldn't seem to gather enough evidence to prosecute this man. And in the meanwhile, he moved on and has married not one, but 2 women since then. 2 more women he's been married to in 7 years. This is not unlike him. He's had multiple wives. I don't know how many at this point, maybe 5 or 6. This is classic behavior of narcissistic men. They tend to have multiple partners because of their own psychology and their own wounding and their own behaviors. They usually will have a woman for a little while, and then they will get tired of her for one reason or another, and they move on to somebody else. This is standard behavior for narcissistic men. So I don't know how many wives he's had, but he's had at least 2 in the last 7 years, just since my mother died. And I believe he married my mom less than a year after his previous wife had died. And less than a year after my mom had died, he had already put a ring on somebody else's finger. So I have been dealing with this for 7 years. It's only as of about 2 years ago that I was able to fully forgive this man for what he did to my mother. It took me about 5 years to get through it and to it. I did a forgiveness series last year on the channel. For those of you who are interested, there's a playlist. And it's called Discerning Forgiveness. And I talked a little bit about this in that series, how I was able to forgive. And it is a whole different level of forgiveness to forgive someone who murders your mother. That is just a whole different level of forgiveness that I had never experienced or had to work through. I knew that I was required to do it because God says that we can't be forgiven if we don't forgive. That is Bible. I knew that I had to figure this out. I knew that I had to work through it, and the Lord helped me through it. And so I did a teaching last year, if you're interested in that teaching, on discerning forgiveness and how to get there. The case has been open for 7 years. I got tired of calling. I got tired of getting breadcrumb updates. So I finally told my brother, don't call me again until the call is David is being arrested. Don't call me again until that is the update. And we have never gotten a death certificate because the case is still open on our mother. She was so mutilated and brutally killed that she had to be cremated, which wouldn't have been my preference for what happened with my mother's body and how she was processed, if you will. I would have rather been able to bury her, but her body was so messed up after the murder and the autopsy that had to be done for investigative purposes that We approved cremation after that. The last time I saw my mom was May of 2018. And I had no idea that 5 months later she would be deceased. And then I would never see her again. And when I saw her in May, she was unhappy. I could tell she was unhappy. I could discern it. I knew she was unhappy in her marriage because we talked about it all the time. Not just unhappy. Extremely unhealthy levels of narcissistic behavior were happening. She was in danger. I tried to get her to move to Dallas with me. I offered everything, as did my aunt. She had multiple people who were on her side who wanted to get her out of it. And when you're in that type of abuse and that is what your brain registers as love, you cannot get out of it. And only people who have either been in these situations or been super close to people who are understand it. You cannot know what this kind of abuse does to a person's mind. It will be beyond you. You will not be able to fathom why this person cannot leave. It is so demonic and unprecedented that I cannot even articulate it to you. How the enemy uses these people, and I'm saying people because there's plenty of narcissistic women as well. How the enemy uses these people in the earth to control people and literally take people's lives. It is demonic. It is a demonic spirit that is allowed to operate through this person. And the demonic comes in to operate on top of the unhealed wounds. This is why it is imperative and important when we know we have something broken in us that we do everything possible to heal it, that we go to the Lord and say, I need you. I need you to help me heal this. Whatever this thing is in me that's broken or wounded, help me heal it, Lord. Show me the way. Help me do whatever I have to do. Because when we don't heal, this is that hurt people thing. When you don't take responsibility for your own wounds and you don't do the work, you will hurt one person after another, repeatedly and over and over and over again. And this is so rampant in the earth that we can't even fathom it. And the enemy knows exactly what to do and how to use it. 7 years this case has been open. And to be honest with you, I gave up on any progress. I gave up on the case being closed a long time ago when I forgave him, when I let go of everything. I gave it to the Lord basically, and I said, I'm not going to call them anymore. I told my brother I don't want any more updates unless he's being arrested. That's the update. That's the next update you can give me. And I let it go, and I released it to the Lord. Yesterday, Friday, November 14th, I got that call from my brother. Mish, the police department has a new DA, and from what I hear, she's a whippersnapper. She came in, she discovered my mom's case was still open and reviewed it and began to just crack the whip, for lack of a better term I can think of at the moment, and said, I want this case solved. A grand jury was convened to review the evidence to see if there was enough evidence to prosecute this man for first-degree murder. And they determined that there absolutely is. I knew that. I've known that for 7 years. And a warrant was issued for his arrest yesterday. I'm recording this on Saturday, November 15th. It's been exactly 7 years and 2 months since this man took my mother's life. And 7 prophetically is the number of completion, as we know. It means a lot of other things, but 7 is very significant throughout biblical scripture and in the Bible and in God's kingdom. He created the earth in 7 days, and he will finish the earth in 7 years. That is the tribulation. 7 is a very important number to God. So it doesn't surprise me that the Lord would administer justice after 7 years. After 7 years, we are getting justice for the death of our mother. And I came to the lake today to walk, and on the way to the lake, I just broke down in tears. And I told the Lord, I never thought I would see justice. And I want to say this, I know there's so many stories like mine. Trust me, I have watched hundreds of documentaries of people who have stories like mine, who never get justice, never got justice, or will never get justice. I can't explain to you why some people do and some people don't. It is a fallen world. It's not God's fault. But what I do know is that when he does decide that justice should be served, his ways are not our ways. I can't explain why some people get justice and other people don't. I don't know the answer to that. But the fact that he has, in this case, given my mother justice, I can't even tell you how grateful I am to the Lord. It is just one more thing that shows me the faithfulness of God. He has delivered me and delivered me and delivered me and delivered me and helped me and brought me out and waited on me and been patient with me and waited longer and waited and waited and been patient and healed. It's innumerable what God has done in my life. To now add the justice of my mother's death to the list, the loyalty to God that I carry is beyond what I can even articulate to you. And we're not loyal to God because of what he does for us. But every time he shows up in your life, your loyalty should go deeper and deeper and deeper with the Lord. Every time he shows up. I don't know what happens next. I believe my brother and I are supposed to get some sort of packet. And we'll go from there. But at the very least, this man deserves to be behind bars for the rest of his natural born life. I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I have forgiven this man because I recognize that he was operating under a demonic influence and had his own issues and his own set of wounds. And I understand the world we live in, and I have context for what happened. I don't need any more explanation from him. I never, ever need to speak to him again. If I get the opportunity to, I would look him in the eye and say a few things. But I don't need it because I forgive you. I've released you. And every time I see Erica Kirk speak, I know what that feels like. And I know what that forgiveness process feels like. And I know how hard it is to process it and actually do it as a believer. Every time she speaks, I know exactly what that feels like. So what I want you to know is if you have a situation as traumatic and brutal as this, or maybe not, maybe it's a lower level thing in your life that you that you want to see God's justice in, you may or you may not. I don't know why some people get justice in this life and others don't. But what I can tell you is that even if this had never happened, even if there was no physical justice in this realm that I ever got to see to avenge my mother's death, I already knew spiritually that her death would be avenged in the spirit realm. And that someday this man will be judged. Seeing it in the physical realm, it's just a cherry on top, to be honest, of what we already know happens in the spirit realm. So if you are praying for or wanting justice, know that you may not see it in this realm, but there is retribution. There is retribution in the kingdom of God. And we reap what we sow. So you will get your justice. It may not be in this plane and in this life, this physical fleshly life, but there will be justice. And I want you to take comfort in that today. That's why I'm sharing this story with you. God is just. God is just.